As the rain started to fall, he ran to the bus stop near the park. At least the bench there had a shade to shelter him from the rain. He had been living on the streets for a couple of years now that he was used to the long cold nights. Before we continue, please take some time to subscribe to Dailydose, like and share this video with your friends. Normally he was not allowed to sleep there, but it was very late, and there were no bus trips now. Then he saw a girl approach. She was drenched in the rain, and she looked very scared. Little did he know that this girl was about to change his life. James looked up at the sky as it started to rain. He sat up on the park bench he was sleeping on and thought to himself that it was going to be another long, cold night. He had been living in the streets for so many years now and was used to sleeping in the rain. But winter was coming and the winds were colder. He did not want to get sick, so he looked at the shaded bus stop nearby. It was late in the evening, so the bus rides would have stopped by now. Maybe he could spend a few hours there. James made his way to the shaded bench and sat down. He had nothing to call his own, and he had been depending on the generosity of strangers on the street. Yet, James tried to stay kind and positive despite his cruel fate. James had been alone and hungry most of the time, but he always made sure he shared any meal he had with stray cats and dogs. He liked talking to people and lending a hand, although not everyone would warm up to him and accept his assistance. James noticed that there was a girl on the streets. Her hair and clothes were soaked, and she looked very scared. There was nobody else on the street but James. He thought if the girl was in trouble, he was her only hope. The girl decided to take shelter at the bus stop as well. As she was trying to wring out the water from her hair and clothes, James asked her if she was in trouble. The girl was surprised at first. She looked at his kind eyes and figured out he was harmless. The girl told him that she missed the last bus, and she did not have enough cash on her for a taxi. She was too far away from home to walk, and she was scared to be walking by herself this late. Her phone died, so she could not call anyone to pick her up. James knew what it was like to feel lost and scared. He also knew that these streets were not a good place for a pretty young girl to be stranded. James checked his pockets and found he had a few dollars on him. James took out all the cash he had and told the girl to take it so that she could take a taxi and get home safely. The girl could not believe it. She refused to take the money from him, saying he needed it more than she did. But James insisted, telling her he was used to staying out in the streets, and she was not. Right now, she was the one who needed the money more. The girl was moved by his kindness, and she had tears in her eyes when she reluctantly took the money from him. The girl thanked him and told him she would never forget this. And as if on perfect timing, an empty taxi was headed their way. The girl hailed it and thanked James one last time before getting in the cab. James was glad he was able to help out that girl, even if it meant losing the chance to grab himself a good meal. He believed in good karma, and he knew that his good deed would not go unnoticed by the universe. He slept well, knowing that he did something good. James woke up early the next day so that he would not bother the early commuters at the bus stop. It was still cold, but the rain had already stopped. He made his way to a public toilet nearby and cleaned up his face. He then went to the park and his usual bench. James then felt a tap on his back. He turned around, and to his surprise, it was the girl from last night. She was looking at him with a big smile on her face. She said she had been looking for him around the area so that she could thank him properly. She held out a big paper bag to him and told James that she wanted to give it to him. James was touched. He could not believe she would go out of her way to find a homeless person. The girl sat down on the bench and introduced herself as Sarah. Sarah told him that she had been having a horrible week and that yesterday was the worst. The only thing that made her feel better was when she met him last night. She could not stop thinking about how selfless and kind he was on the ride home. Sarah opened the paper bag to show him what she brought. There was a thick blanket to help him stay warm and a change of clothes. There was also a hot meal. She also gave him some money so he could get himself some food for the next couple of days. James refused to take the cash, but Sarah insisted, saying it was an amount that she could easily up back. It was all nothing compared to what James did for her last night. James told her he would accept the cash on one condition. He had to share the hot meal with her. Sarah laughed and told him he would be glad to. Sarah and James enjoyed the meal together, and they had not noticed they were talking for a few hours. Sarah found James easy to talk to, and James was just glad for some company. James told Sarah that he practically lived in the park. He would often take a walk to see if he could score a meal. Then he would use the public toilet of the park for his other needs. That's why he still managed to keep a neat appearance. Sarah could not imagine what kind of life James had been living. But when she talks to him, she easily forgets that he is a homeless guy with many troubles. He was so easygoing that Sarah wanted to get to know him more. Over the next few weeks, Sarah would show up every couple of days to visit James whenever she could. She would bring him essentials like toiletries and food. Each time she would visit him, she would spend at least an hour talking to him. Sarah and James were only years apart in age. They talked about anything and found they had a lot of things in common. Sarah had never felt so comfortable talking to anyone. She felt like she could tell James anything without fear of being judged. Her visits to him were almost therapeutic. If she was having a bad day, she would go to the park to look for him, and she would be feeling okay after having a chat with him. But James was not as open as she was. Although there was no denying that they had developed a deeper friendship, James was still not comfortable telling Sarah how he ended up in the streets. Sarah told him that she would not judge, but James was not yet ready. James felt a bit guilty for holding back, but Sarah reassured him that it was nothing. She understood it was a difficult subject. Sarah knew she would never truly know what it feels like to be in his shoes, so she wanted to do something more for James. You see, Sarah came from a rich family, but she did not care about the money. Growing up, she was unable to spend time with her parents because they were always busy at work. She was mostly raised by the nanny her parents hired to take care of her. Sarah was not in a position to complain. She got everything she asked for. She grew up having the most beautiful clothes and the most popular toys. Sarah never had a problem with it until she started high school and started to change. Sarah used to be one of the best students in her class, but she started to skip classes and her grades dropped. People dismissed it as teenage rebellion, but the truth was, Sarah realized she was unhappy. All she wanted was to have a normal relationship with her parents. She promised that she would never become like her parents who only cared about making money. She wanted to appreciate the little things. Sarah was now in her senior year in college. Her parents bought her a small apartment and sent her a lot of money every month, but she only spent what she needed as part of her mission to not revolve her life around money. When she met James and saw how selfless he was in giving his last cash to a stranger like her, she was deeply touched by it. After knowing James for over a year, Sarah eventually asked him to move in with her. He could try to get a job now that he has a home. James could not believe what Sarah was offering. He asked her if he was sure, and Sarah just laughed, saying he was practically her best friend now, and she could use a good housemate like him. She told her he did not have to worry about anything. James could have his room, and he can contribute by helping her keep the apartment clean. James told her he could do more than that, like cooking and doing all the errands too. It was a big deal, but he did not want people to think that he was taking advantage of her. Sarah shook her head and told him she did not care about what people think. After all, she had been visiting him and sharing meals with him in the park for over a year now. Since he would be willing to do the errands and chores, he's practically paying her back. James immediately cleaned up, and Sarah took him home with her. She showed him the guest room, which was now his room, and gave him a tour of the small apartment she owned. That night, they shared their first home-cooked meal as roommates.